Let's be honest, if our politicians really wanted housing to be more affordable, it would be by now. They've had decades to fix it. They've had inquiries, commissions, roundtables, and billions thrown at so-called affordability schemes. And yet, what do we have? Record house prices, record rents, a generation of young Aussies wondering if they'll ever own a home. Maybe, just maybe, that's not an accident. In today's Big Picture podcast, I'm joined by Australia's leading property tax strategist, Ken Race, Director of Metropole Wealth Advisory, to unpack why housing affordability, why the crisis isn't a policy failure, it's the system working exactly as it was designed. We're going to explore why politicians can't afford for property prices to fall, how government policy quietly rewards property owners, and what it means for investors like you. So welcome to another episode of the Michael Yardney podcast. Look, after 5 decades in property, I've seen about every cycle, trend, and so-called crisis there is. And I know how confusing it can be with all the mixed messages out there. Everyone's got an opinion, and not all of them are worth listening to. That's why twice each week I cut through the clutter to bring you clear, practical insights about building wealth through property, proven strategies, smart psychology, and lessons from some of Australia's leading experts like Ken Race today. So whether you're just starting out or already well on the way, my aim is to help you make better decisions, grow your wealth safely through property investment, and build a life of financial independence and choices. So if you're wondering why housing affordability programs seem to do the opposite, this episode will open your eyes as I discuss the topic and a number of others with Ken Race. So let's get into it. Ken, we've both been around long enough to see governments promise housing affordability. It doesn't just happen at election cycles, even though it seems to. But here we are again with record house prices, record rents, and affordability issues.
We certainly are, and people shrug and say, why is it so? They don't understand the basic fundamentals.
Well, that's what I want to unpack with you today, because behind the political theatre, I think we can actually find a deeper story, one that most people don't realise, that the government actually wants people who own property to benefit. In fact, the system does as well. So at the moment, about 70% of Australians own their home or are paying it off. We know, in fact, about 50% of people who own a home don't even have a mortgage. And that's because they bought their home 30, 40 years ago, the baby boomers. So with 70% of Australians, and let's call them voters, owning homes, I can't see politicians want home values to stagnate and definitely not to fall. It would anger voters. It would harm our economy and the banks. And let's be blunt, many of the politicians own properties themselves. Economist Sol Eslake said politicians don't want house prices to fall. They just want houses to be more affordable. At higher prices, Ken.
That's it. And look, we go back even to the last federal election. Both parties explicitly stated they wanted to see Australian house prices rise, even from those substantial levels at the time.
Yes.
At their election campaigns, they said they wanted to rise. And can I say more, as recent as 2003, it seems such a long time ago, but John Howard said that everyone with a home wants to see prices grow. So in the back of their mind, they're almost seeing it as political survival to maintain high prices and growth, continued growth. And I believe they subconsciously implement strategies which actually aid in achieving that outcome, even though they espouse words to the opposite.
Clearly. Now, one of the big things at the moment is that new first homeowner incentive where first homeowners can buy a property with a 5% deposit. In Melbourne, it's $950,000, Brisbane up to $1 million, in Sydney up to $1.5 million. Sure, they've got to be able to afford the serviceability, but Ken, this isn't letting them get into cheap homes. They don't have to pay lenders mortgage insurance. The government is guaranteeing them to buy median price houses. Boy, when you and I started, and people are going to say, oh, look, they're old people complaining, but we never even considered as a first home buyer to buy a medium priced property.
No, and you bought a house that fitted in with that part of your life, a smaller house. It wasn't a forever home.
Sure.
And look, when we look at politicians' desire to see house prices grow, it stems from the fact that at the state level, and at state and federal and council, of course, but at the state level, over 50% of a state's government's income comes from
Yeah.
property-related property prices and taxes, so property-related taxes. So the 5% stamp duty, the land tax. We see GST on new housing going to the federal government. Even at the council level, we see council rates set at the unimproved capital value, which
Yes.
is everything is driving the revenue base of governments. And if that slowed down, and you see it every now and again with the cycle falls, which it does inevitably every now and again, all the governments cry poor mouth. They're still
Yes.
getting their 5% or whatever on stamp duty, but on lower numbers. So what we see particularly with, can I say short-term schemes, to give the impression that they're helping, the 5%, as
Yes.
you said. It stimulates demand at that level, but really what it does, it allows people to spend more money in that area. So we're
Yes.
putting money into the second home buyers. So it's a stimulus that's actually feeding growth in house prices. It's like a sugar hit. So
Yes.
for the consumer, it's a sugar hit. For a government getting taxes, it's like can I dare say it, and it's probably not opportune to say it, it's like another drug they're taking.
Well, it gets great headlines and makes the politicians look good, doesn't it? But I've also heard it say it's like giving paracetamol to somebody who needs surgery, they're easing the pain for a moment, but it doesn't fix the cause, because we've discussed this before. It's not worth going into at this point. There are long-term structural reforms that are going to be necessary to make housing more affordable. Australia's economy is underpinned by property. You've already explained how the governments at three levels are dependent on it. But banks, which are our biggest financial institutions, they're totally dependent on it as well, aren't they?
They certainly are. So a bank's balance sheet is predominantly sitting on the back of, can I say, residential loans.
Yes.
And they want to see them not default, if I can put a negative on a negative. And when we see Australia's default rates at less than 2%, it's actually even a little bit less than for investors.
Yes,
And
it
that's
is.
because they've got another source of income, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So the bank's balance sheet, which then allows them to lend on for business and the multitude of other things, their balance sheet sits on a strong residential home loan balance sheet. The other thing we see is increasing prices increases homeowner confidence.
Of course.
And when people are happy, we used to say, when you're happy and you know it, clap your hands. Well,
Yes.
as a homeowner, when you're happy and you know it, go and buy something, another fridge, another couch. So homeowner confidence plummets when house prices fall.
Yes.
They
Or
see
stagnate.
or
Or these
stagnate.
negative news. Yes.
Correct. And then, as I said, if they're happy, they'll go and buy another consumer good, which then supports employment levels. It supports activity. We always talk about gross domestic product, GDP, which is what does a country produce? It all supports that. So the illusion that we want to see actions that depress those three things is really an illusion.
Well, interestingly, the government doesn't really want property prices to fall. In fact, it's the opposite. It needs to keep feeding the property machine, Ken.
That's right. I mean, some people say they're trapped by their own success. I say they're trapped by their greed. They want that money to come in. They want their popularity to retain. They want to be voted in again. So rising property values make voters happy. It makes banks happy. It kicks along the economy. All three actually add to a prosperous economy.
There's another element of it in Australia. Home ownership equals success in Australia's psyche. There's a cultural bias to that. And yes, there are a lot of migrants coming, and they're coming here with the aspiration of owning a home. That's why they're leaving their country, for other reasons as well, for political and economic stability. But home ownership equals success in many people's eyes. And the media then glorifies it with record home values, banks push property loans to try and get people into it. I guess this cultural mindset reinforces the policy choices that favour homeowners.
It certainly does. And you mentioned the statistic before, 70% of homes are owner-occupiers, whether they're paying it off
Yep.
or they're fully paid. But that number is significantly different to call it Europe.
Oh,
where
yes.
home ownership is much less. So a lot of these migrants actually aspire to come to Australia because of the great Australian dream to
Yes.
own a home.
Yeah.
And while we see 70% of homes are owner occupiers, leaving 30% for renters, and that's not because those renters have to be there. They're either transient, they're moving interstate, they could be saving for a deposit, they could be in between jobs, they're new migrants. So it's not necessarily a bad thing. But Australians are also using high home prices as their basis for retirement. And
Yes.
when they retire, they can either move into care or, as a lot of people are doing, that becomes the fundamental asset to hand down to your next children to give them the leg up. So there is this cultural bias there.
Very much.
And the media glorifies record home values. You see it plastered. You see record auction rates.
Yes.
So it's all driving to this inevitable outcome that while the little schemes, the 5% schemes and things like that, they're at the fringes. They add a little bit of demand, but it doesn't structurally change supply.
Well, so it's not just politics, it's our national identity. We've built a national story around property, owning it, growing it, protecting it. So no government wants to rewrite the story. But Ken, there's something else that I don't think many people recognise. 94% of federal politicians own property. They have to declare what their assets are. So 94% of federal politicians own property, including a home. 67% of Australians, roughly 1 in 3 MPs and senators owns 3 or more properties, Ken. Some even hold small portfolios that rival professional property investors. Maybe call me cynical, but maybe it's not surprising that negative gearing and capital gains tax discounts remain politically untouchable, or that almost every housing policy props up house prices instead of easing them. Some would say you can't fix affordability when the people writing the rules are personally invested in keeping property values high.
That's right. I mean, there's one core principle to house prices.
Mm,
Can I say everybody needs shelter?
yeah.
So there is a natural floor on house prices. It's not like a share that'll go to zero or have a 60, 70, 80% fall. So unless a property is, can I say, contaminated, it's never really going to fall to zero. Politicians have got two things over the general mum and dad. They've got, can I dare say, higher income than the average person. So therefore that disposable income is higher and therefore their investments. They're not really putting their own money into super. So this becomes an additional income stream for them in retirement. And a lot of, particularly at the federal level, they've got another property that they go and live in when they travel to Canberra or whatever. So there's real reasons for them to have, can I say, one extra property, but 2 or 3 is they've seen the value. And the argument of let's get rid of negative gearing because that's, can I say, spurring investors to come into the market, increasing prices. I was reading something actually only in the last couple of weeks where if you imagine you're allowed to get negative gearing, i.e. a loss, because you're saying I'm going to make money eventually and selling a property, which then creates capital gains tax. The government collects significantly more money out of the capital gains on the sale of
Yes.
a property than they give in negative gearing.
Yes.
So one is looking at it today, the other one is looking at over the lifetime of it. And politicians know this. And, if they get rid of it, it won't be for the financial reasons. It'll be because of, can I say, jealousy or whatever by the haves and the have-nots. So I don't expect them to be changing the rules. They might tinker at the edges, et cetera, et cetera. They might say you can only claim negative gearing, on 1 or 2 properties, et cetera, because most property investors only own 1 or 2. And they tend to be teachers, policemen, people
Yeah.
in
Yeah.
services, not
Everyday Australians.
everyday Australians. So you're actually penalising them more so than the top end of town.
Now, in today's Big Picture podcast, there's another topic I want to discuss that's very relevant to property and property investment and those who are interested in property. We're going to get onto that in a second, but I thought maybe we'd close off this little segment of today's chat by reminding investors that the system is built to protect property values. Now, that doesn't mean all properties are going to increase in value at the same rate. And it's important, if you want to outperform, to own the right properties in the right ownership structures, have the right finance in place, the right buffers. Because at the end of the day, this affordability and political doublespeak, I wouldn't let it get in the way of you looking after your own financial circumstances. So if you already own property, the bias that we're talking about is in your favor. But if you're looking to build a portfolio, time is still on your side. But you've got to buy strategically. And that's where an obligation-free chat with the Metropole Wealth Strategist can help you. Rather than speculating on short-term moves, our team will help you craft a long-term evidence-based plan to grow, protect and pass on your wealth safely. So if you'd like personal guidance on how to take advantage of this political and economic environment, the options that are there, I'll leave a link in the show notes, but go to metropole.com.au and book your complimentary wealth discovery chat with one of our wealth strategists at Metropole. Because even if the politicians are playing their own property game, there's no reason why you can't win yours. Now, at Metropole, we are much more than just buyer's agents. So Ken and his team at Metropole Wealth Advisory actually take the strategic planning to the next level to help you structure yourself. Maybe you could quickly explain before we go on to the next topic, Ken, what you and your team do and how you help clients.
So, in a nutshell, we help people grow, protect, and pass on their wealth. And we
Hey, I said that already, Ken.
I know that, but that's what it's all about. It's each part of Metropole, if I can put it that way, supports the whole. And that's what we try and do with our clients. We start off with a holistic view of where they are at the moment and where they're trying to get to. And then we build a plan around how they're going to get there. So we look at tax, we look at their accounting, we look at structures for business people. Are they in the right business structure? How to reduce their taxes, how to then pass on that wealth safely. So it's all about making it now, keeping it, and then passing it on in a coherent way where each piece of the jigsaw puzzle fits in with the other.
That's a good way of saying it, because it really has to be part of a long, big picture strategy, not just buying a property. That's an event. It's really a big long-term process, isn't it?
It is. And one of the things a lot of our clients get a lot of value is because we're holistic, they don't have to go and talk to their accountant or their lawyer. And this is what the guys at Metropole Wealth said. We become their voice. So nothing's lost in translation. And what we get is leverage of an outcome. So we leverage what the benefits are when it fits in with everything else.
Well, just go to the link in the show notes, or just remember metropole.com.au. And when you leave a note about what you'd like to do and talk about wealth, then you can have a chat with Ken and his team. Now, Ken, the other thing I'd like to discuss today is the concept that consumer confidence is falling. Look, if you've been watching the headlines, you know consumers are in a bit of a funk at the moment. Despite interest rates falling, the ANZ Roy Morgan survey and the Westpac surveys show consumer confidence is sitting below that neutral level of 100, that if it's above 100, we're more overall confident than we are negative. But it's the longest stretch of pessimism on record. Despite inflation coming under control, despite the couple of interest rate drops we've had, it's flat. What's going on, Ken?
This is, can I use the word despair? And I talk to a lot of people and that word comes out. Words are being thrown at them that they should be better off. Inflation's coming under control. Your interest rates are coming down. Unemployment levels are at historic lows, notwithstanding they went up in the last registered count.
Tiny bit.
Tiny bit. But what they're seeing in their day-to-day life is not that. And a lot of them are questioning, is it just me or is it everybody?
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's causing, I think, this despair. And I sort of link it to a family group. The family is earning $X and, they can spend money. They go on the occasional dinner or whatever. And then they get a new member in that family. They've still got the same amount of money, but it's now got to be spread over more people. And that's what's happened in the Australian economy. We've had high levels of increased population, and that's when we talk about migration levels, et cetera, et cetera. And therefore, we've got the same size pie now being shared by more people. So while the pie might be growing, the amount that each person gets is actually reducing. And that's that per capita GDP that we've been seeing sliding over the last 3 or 4 years, apart from a couple of months where it's improved.
I guess there's also the continual conveyor belt of negative headlines, Ken. Global uncertainty, political tensions, constant talk of a housing crisis. I guess it wears people down.
It does. It's night and day, and it's fatigue. And they're actually seeing it with their mortgage, with their loans. It's, yes, interest rates might come down. No, they won't. We're actually seeing at the renters level, will my rents go up? I can't save fast enough. So it's this fatigue, and they're being desensitized in a way to not feel the pain as much. So even after a couple of years, we saw interest rates going up. We're now seeing them come down, but it's slowed down. So can I use the word the Australian population were promised? Now, obviously not in specific words, but they were promised a better outcome, and they're
Yeah.
not getting it. And that's where they're feeling, I think, unease, and they're actually not feeling better off, and they're actually feeling worse off. So
Well, this has a ripple effect on
yep.
the economy, on their spending and on property, doesn't it, Ken?
It does. It ripples throughout the whole of society. And, it's when is enough enough? So that's when people are now starting to maybe have a bit of hope. But with hope, they have to see a couple of wins. Even if they're small wins, they want to see a couple of things going in their direction. And that's what they're all hopeful for. And that's why they keep hanging on, if you like, with hope.
Well, interestingly, Warren Buffett said, be fearful when others are greedy and be greedy when others are fearful. So for the optimists, and I believe all the successful business people, entrepreneurs, investors that you and I have dealt with over the years, they have an optimistic outlook. They believe the future is going to be better. I guess they're taking a contrarian opportunity. Investors may find this a good time to act while others are fearful.
That's right. And I think, like Warren Buffett, you just don't buy anything. Things
Yes,
have to
yes.
be of investment grade, whether it's a share, whether it's a property, or else it could be a millstone around your neck. So that's where this psychology of trust comes in.
Mm.
People are hopeful. They've seen a slump in the economy. They're seeing it improve. And I still get people, of a certain vintage, of a certain age, talk about the recession we had to have.
Oh, yes, I remember that
So
well.
this is why the Reserve Bank tries to put a stranglehold against rising inflation, because rising inflation will hurt you more than almost anything else. And then they've really got to put the brakes on, and then things go backwards, which is when unemployment levels unfortunately rise quite dramatically.
So it's a level of mistrust, I guess, that you're saying people don't trust the government. They don't trust the government to fix housing, like we said a moment ago, or they're not sure. They don't trust the banks. They're very skeptical of big corporations. Social media helps this mindset, doesn't it?
It certainly does. It's almost like they're living in their own little bubble. When I feel good, I'll do my little bit. But there's been this big shift from pre-pandemic mindset to now. So while, trust is being built, they're seeing a little bit of stability. But that's, if you like, the negatives are reducing. That they want to start seeing those positives. So
Yep.
unfortunately, bad news sells. So when you see the newspaper, when you see the headlines, we don't see enough good stories, because there are good stories around. And now we're starting to see, if you like, an emphasis on Buy Australia. That will make a massive difference if we have more and more money being spent on Australian goods. Which goods? That's yet to be determined.
A bit like what's happening overseas. We've got to support ourselves here. So confidence is cyclical, but what would your advice be to people listening to us or watching this? What should they be looking out for to notice that we're pulling out of this funk?
Yeah, I think the headlines, unfortunately, will start appearing after the fact. So we've got to start looking at indicators that will start telling us things are on the improve before it starts putting in the press. And for me, there's probably three odd things. We've got to see this ANZ Roy Morgan index moving above that 90%. That's that index that tells us how we're traveling. And we've got to be getting it towards that magic 100. And 100 is only a break even. It's
That's
okay.
break
Things aren't,
even, exactly. Optimists and pessimists are equal.
Correct. So at this point in time, we're below that. So we want to see it get above that 90, head towards the 100 and then above. And they're stats that people can look at periodically. The time to buy a major household item, and there's some sub indexes that we see. So
Yes.
often the first thing we see is consumers start to feel better. We start to see those green shoots, and I use that word a little bit carefully, but green shoots of money start being spent. So you start to see the big retailers starting to talk confidently that they're starting to see a turnaround. Not that there has been, but they're starting. The other thing is, I think wages growth is going to be the big one, and real wages growth. And unfortunately,
Real as opposed to, in other words, above inflation.
above inflation.
Yeah.
So when I'll get more money, that's actually allowing me to have more than what the price of that product went up last time. So unfortunately, in Australia, real wage growth, I believe, is coupled with productivity. You can't get paid more unless, can I say, your boss is making more money, or else I'll go bankrupt. And we've certainly seen this is almost the highest period of small business bankruptcy we've ever seen. So we've got to couple, if you like, productivity growth, and that's part of the AI revolution. But I'm not talking about people losing work. He still is, a very, very good friend. He was a watchmaker. He thought he would go out of business when all these little electronic watches came out.
Yes.
But he survived that. He went into mechanics and, fixing cars. But now it's back again as a hobby because real watches have come back into vogue. So we're going to see that productivity grow because people will be pushed into that begrudgingly. And then the natural benefit of that, I think, will be wage growth. And I think one of Australia's big billionaires said it in the last few days. We don't compete against what everybody else in the world competes at, where they have competitive advantage in different things like labour costs, energy, transport. We got to compete in those things that we can stand out from the crowd. And then that's when this economy will start to grow. That's when we'll see wages growth. So that was a long way around talking about wages growth as being a leading indicator that we should be looking out for.
Well, I'd like to remind our listeners not to get negative about this. Don't confuse emotion with opportunity. While confidence is low, health is still rising in Australia. There's lots of different reports. Recently, Allianz Global Wealth Report showed Australians are amongst the wealthiest people in the world. And the vast majority of that's due to their homes, their property. Because as we said earlier, in a lot of other countries, people don't own their homes. So it's property and their superannuation. And if you focus on the fundamentals, take a long-term perspective, invest strategically, not emotionally, you're going to come out ahead when the world keeps moving on and Australia does. So Ken, I think that's a good reminder, and thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. Often lower consumer confidence sets the stage for the next upswing. Every downswing sets the stage for the next upturn. And the takeaway for investors is, at the moment, property markets are doing well. Imagine how well they're going to do when confidence increases again, because people don't make big decisions like moving home or buying investments until they're feeling more financially secure. But don't wait for the government to fix affordability. Just focus on how you can build and protect your own wealth within the system that we've got. And if you'd like some help creating a personalized plan to grow your property portfolio safely and strategically, why not have a complimentary wealth discovery chat with one of our wealth strategists at Metropole? As I said, I'll leave a link in the show notes for Metropole for that. Discuss your own opportunities. By the way, if you got some benefit from this chat with Ken and me and you don't currently subscribe to this show, click the subscribe or follow button on wherever you're watching or listening to this. And actually on the podcast apps, click the automatic download so you get our share sessions. The Michael Yardley podcast comes out twice a week, and share this with somebody who you think would get some benefit from it. That's the only thing Ken and I are asking you to do. Share it with somebody else to help other Australians. Our intention, our aim is to make more Australians financially literate and know what's going on, Ken.
That's right. And I think the takeaway, if I can put it that, for investors is be investment ready. And by that, I mean, it's like an athlete, someone going to go into the Olympics. They don't just suddenly go into the Olympics. They've got to train, they've got to get ready, they've got to know which sports they're good at and then play those. And that's what we've got to do as investors. It's a business. So
Yes.
invest in yourself, educate yourself, and then get yourself investment ready. And then you'll be able to take, I think, advantage of these opportunities as they arise.
Thanks, Ken. Look forward to catching up with you again real soon to have another chat.
Thank you, Michael.
If you're a regular listener to this podcast, you'd know that each week I have a trivia question to give you, my listeners and viewers, an opportunity to win a hard copy of one of my best-selling books. I'm at the moment giving away Michael Yardney's Guide to Investing Successfully. I'm going to ask you a question and just go to propertytrivia.com.au and answer the question, leave your answer. And each week, 3 correct answers win a hard copy of one of my books. But don't worry if you're listening to a slightly older episode. Your entry still counts, and everyone who enters gets a property report. This week's question is true or false. The Sydney Harbour Bridge has something built into its pylons. Are there apartments in the pylons of the Sydney Harbour Bridge? True or false? Leave your answer at propertytrivia.com.au. Leave that link in the show notes for you as well.
Now here's Michael's mindset message. Remember, a change in your thinking will lead to a change in your life.
In my mindset message today, I'd like to talk to you about the antelope principle. But hang on, this is going to be really important for you as a business owner, as an entrepreneur, as a property investor, because you see, every day we face choices, whether we chase field mice or hunt antelope. Now, let me explain. A lion can easily catch field mice, but it takes more energy to catch and eat that mouse than the mouse even provides in return. If the lion spends all day chasing these little things, it would slowly starve, despite being busy and active. But when the lion hunts an antelope, it's a completely different story, isn't it? Yes, it takes more effort, more patience, and more strategy, but the reward is a feast that sustains the lion and its pride. Now, the same applies to us. We all have a limited amount of time, energy, and focus, and if we spend it chasing field mice, those little distractions, the low-value tasks and the shiny opportunities that make us feel busy but don't really move us close to our goals, we end up exhausted but unfulfilled. Now, to be honest, I've been there myself, ending the day feeling spent, realizing that I've been busy all day, but haven't achieved anything meaningful. It's easy to confuse activity with achievement, but motion isn't momentum. A rocking horse moves all day, but it doesn't get anywhere, does it? Antelope hunting, on the other hand, means focusing on high-impact goals and meaningful projects that take time, courage, and persistence. They're not as easy or as instantly rewarding, but they're what builds wealth, success, and lasting fulfillment. So ask yourself today, are you chasing field mice or hunting antelope? Are you spending your energy on the urgent or what's important? What could you automate, delegate, or delete to create space for real progress? Because just like the lion, if you spend your life chasing mice, you'll burn out. But if you commit to hunting antelope, the big, the meaningful goals that feed your future, you'll thrive. So my mindset message for you today, or question in reality, is, what are you hunting today? Thank you for spending the last little while with me. I hope you got some benefit from this show. But before you move on to the next podcast you're going to listen to, let me remind you I have another show that I produce once a week with leading demographer Simon Kirstenmacher. We call that Demographics Decoded, where Simon and I unveil the trends that are going to shape your future. In my mind, this is a must-listen-to podcast for anyone interested in property investment, but also for business people and entrepreneurs. So if you don't currently subscribe to Demographics Decoded, just please stop for a second and subscribe on your podcast app where you're listening to this, or on YouTube. And of course, if you don't subscribe to this show, the Michael Yardney podcast, why not click the link that says follow or subscribe wherever you're listening right now. So twice a week, you're going to get benefit from my guests and me. And I'd like to ask you a little favour, please. If you did enjoy today's show and you know somebody who would also benefit, please tell them about the Michael Yardney podcast and Demographics Decoded. There's a share button on every podcast app. On Apple Podcast, there are 3 little buttons at the top of the player. Or just tell them about it. Just have a chat with them. Now, I hope you're going to be doing them a favour, and you're definitely going to be doing me a favour in my quest to help as many people as possible to become financially literate. And by the way, I've got a special bonus for you. As my way of saying thank you for subscribing, just go to podcastbonus.com.au. There'll be a link in the show notes, podcastbonus.com.au, where I've got a bunch of ebooks and reports. It's just my way of saying thank you for taking the time to listen. And remember, the information that we give you in this podcast is general information, not specific information about your personal circumstances, because we don't know about them. But if you do want specific information, you can always have a chat with my team at Metropole. Go to metropole.com.au. If you really want to learn more, you can always listen to the previous podcast, the many episodes we've already published. Just go back to the old episodes, which each have lessons about property investment, success, and money. Once again, thanks for listening to today's show.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Michael Yardney podcast, which was brought to you by Metropole, who help their clients grow, protect, and pass on their wealth through strategic property and wealth advice. If you like what you heard and don't already subscribe, you'll find us on iTunes or on your favourite Android app as the Michael Yardney podcast. Watch out for our next show, which comes to you twice a week, and you'll learn some new ideas about property investment, success, and money in around 30 minutes. To get more of Michael's thoughts, go across to www.propertyupdate.com.au and sign up for his daily morning briefing, and you'll hear from not only Michael, but a group of leading property success and money experts. And just a reminder that the information you heard in this show today is general educational advice and not specific investment advice, as we don't know your personal circumstances. If you're looking for specific advice, why not ask the team at Metropole to help you?